Buongiorno, siamo qua per la conferenza stampa del nostro film in concorso The Killer e prima di cominciare presento i nostri ospiti a partire dalla destra in fondo. Il direttore della fotografia Eric Messerschmidt, il responsabile del suono Ren Kleiss, il regista del film David Fincher, il montatore Kirk Baxter. And before we open it to the audience, I have a question. I'm going to start with a question for David, and it's an obvious one. I'm here. It's Julia. Hi.
I was like, it's in stereo.
and it's an obvious one.
Okay.
What
I want to handle all the obvious questions.
Yeah. Well, but what attracted you about this particular version of The Portrait of a Killer?
Oh God, it's such a long answer. I'll try to do this quickly. I love. I've obviously done voiceovers in movies before, and I love them as a precept. And I like them as a storytelling device because they give you access to internal monologues. But my question was always, why is it that we feel that when we've intercepted the thoughts of a character that they're telling the truth? When, we all know a lot of people who lie to themselves. And so I like the idea of an assassin who has to, in order to differentiate what it is that he does from, say, serial killing, he has to, in some way, create a code for himself. And then I like the idea of that code or the bricks in the wall being dismantled by his needs, by necessity, by, having to, as he says, have a plan, never give up on that plan, and yet we see him improvise throughout the film. So I like that.
There's a question here.
Thank you. Congratulations, David. It's Stephen Schaefer here for the Boston Herald. Can you talk about casting your lead here, Michael, and whether you see this as perhaps a comeback for him?
I don't see it as a comeback for him. As far as I'm concerned, he hasn't been around much because he has a whole other career. We had to slot this movie into his driving, and so no, we felt lucky to get him. We wanted him, and had we not been able to fit into his window between racing seasons, we probably wouldn't have made the movie. I wouldn't have.
Why was he so perfect for it?
Well, I think Michael has, obviously his skill set is excellent, and he can do things that are big. And we've also seen him play a robot where he does almost nothing. And so for my money, what was interesting, most of what we know about this guy is how he moves through a very limited world and a very insulated world, even if it's tangential, supposedly, to our own. But I think that he's as an instrument, he's a guy who's he can kind of give you any color that the moment necessitates.
How did you get him to? It's almost like the light is sucked out of him.
Well, we talked about that. I mean, there was an aspect of this character who is extremely sociopathic, and how to dramatize that. And one of the ways that we chose to was by literally not giving anything away.
Amico, una domanda velocissima sulla musica. Come ha collaborato questa volta con i suoi fedeli collaboratori Reznor e Ross, e come mai ha scelto gli Smiths?
I'm sorry, I lost that. What channel is this on? 2? What was it like? I'm on? Yes. Thank you. Yes. Well, Trent and Atticus are first call, so, and if they choose to return your call, I deem myself lucky. The Smiths were a sort of a post-production addition because I knew I wanted to use How Soon Is Now, and I knew and I loved the idea of that song specifically as a tool for assuaging his anxieties. I liked it as a meditation tape. I thought it was amusing and funny. And I don't think that there's, a library of music by recording artists that has as much sort of sardonic nature and wit simultaneously. And we don't get an awful lot of access to who this guy is. I thought through his mixtape it would be amusing to that would be our window into him.
I'd like to follow up on this. As David was saying before, the film is a play between what his philosophy, and his process, or what he's saying to us, and what's actually happening. I'd like to involve everyone else, both on photography and sound and editing, and David, of course, on how you visualize this disparity.
Should I begin?
Yeah.
I feel like the schism between his mantra, the words that he lives by, and his behavior that is forced to adjust, that's ultimately where the movie exists, where the character exists. And so we tried with every trick that we have of ourselves available to. I attempted to, we wanted to be very, very rigorous and formal about certain compositions, especially as his voiceover is confident and as his voiceover is assured and as his voiceover is telling us exactly what it is he thinks he's going to do. And then the moment that disappears, the style of the cinematography changes, the style of the music changes at that point. It becomes a very, and so we tried to kind of use the frantic nature, or maybe handheld, the way that we stage the action to really show unraveling.
Eric, you want to follow up that?
Well, you kind of answered the question. But, yeah, I mean, I think, we very rarely talk about how the movie is going to look, but we talk a lot about the structure of the film in terms of camera direction and what we're going to include in the frame and really what we're going to exclude from the frame. And, I think that, to me, is the most interesting part of the process, is the kind of the window that we allow everyone to look through and controlling that window. And so when we initially talked about how we would tackle that transition in the character's world as things sort of fall apart, and the idea that we can free the camera a little bit in those moments, that to me was really interesting because we hadn't done that before together, and how that changes the way the audience interprets the film. That to me was the most interesting part of the development of the ideas of how we were going to put the movie together, I think. And then everything else just kind of fell into place.
Ran, I think that sound was used in a kind of counterintuitive way in this one. You want to talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
David really wanted to explore a different style of sound design in his film and this one, in that he was wanting to get a feeling of it being like a documentary in a way that the perspective of the camera work would jar you every time there was an edit. Normally in sound, what we try to do is have everything being very smooth and seamless, so that when there are picture edits, you don't see them because you don't hear an accompanying change with every single cut. But David wanted to challenge that aesthetic by hearing every time we cut a sound perspective shift, which is counterintuitive to what we normally do. But what was very interesting about it is that, for me, and what I learned, was that it created an anxiety or a feeling of discomfort, which also communicated a sense of perspective. And that with that perspective shifting, in the beginning of the film, we're in Paris, and there's a heater that comes up. And every time as the camera moves over, the heater shifts in space. And when we cut to the killer's face, the heater's behind us, or it's to the left, or it's to the right. Same thing with the music. When he puts on his earbuds and plays the Smiths, if he has one earbud in, you only hear the music on the right. That was David's idea. My instinct was like, oh, that's a terrible idea. but that's my instinct. And but he was right, of course. And so what was very clever about David's ideas was that he pushed the sound design to make all of you feel what is happening in the soundtrack of this film and why do I feel so uncomfortable? And then with the voiceover and getting to understand, oh, it's an interior monologue. Okay, it's almost like we're inside of his head. And so that was the stepping off point for the sound.
Kirk, the edit is the same pattern of the sort of cool control things and then totally jarring moments.
I guess it's the laws of it that we sort of succumbed to came about in that sniper scene with the Smiths track. So it got full blast of music on his POVs, and there's no room for a voiceover if you're doing that. So then we came into our own rule of when we're on him, we're going to hear his inner monologue. And when we see what he sees, now we're going to push that sound that's in his head. And then that started to apply everywhere. So we put it to the other various scenes that we're using with music. And if it wasn't with music, it became with sound effects. So as a rule, we stayed off any of his VO for his point of views. And that gave a lot of room for Ren to dance in. Mm-hmm. And it became quite a vertical thing with sound.
There's a question here.
Peter Hood, German. Mr. Fincher, I was wondering, I would like to go back to the interior monologue. Okay. It's almost like a Zen mantra. And we are compelled as the audience, it's like a first-person narrator, which in the beginning kind of draws our attention and sympathy. And at the same time, it's always these jarring images, what this sympathetic Zen guy is doing. So I was wondering how did you play with that friction?
As you can imagine, sympathy was the last thing on my mind as it relates to this character. We wanted somebody who was he didn't need to be frightening. The mundanity of evil. The notion is I like very much the idea that my hope is that someone will see this film and get very nervous about the person behind them in line at Home Depot. No, it was very much, I think that for me, you don't really understand it's a mantra until you get to the second kill. And hopefully people will understand that the idea is this is how he psychs himself up. This is how he demeans or degrades his target so that he tells you, look, there's so many people, and I don't know what this person did to be so loathed by somebody, but I'm here, and I flew many, many miles, and I'm sleeping on sheetrock for 5 days, and about to make an awful lot of money if I just don't miss by this much. And the character of the mantra changes. There are times when the mantra is interrupted by somebody who's in the room, and you go, oh, well, is that supposed to happen? He's out walking in the backyard with Tilda, and he's like telling you, he's psyching himself up, and then she goes, oh, should we just do it down here by the river? And I love the idea of, I guess professional athletes go through that. They have their thing that they do, how they prime themselves. And Michael was into this idea and really, really helped us kind of shape the totality of what he would describe, the things that he would engage with. We had a script, but as the fourth time we did the voiceover when we recorded in Dublin, he, everything gets altered and goes away, and it becomes tailored for him. But yeah, the idea was, if you have a thing that you believe in, a core belief, something that is, the repetition of it is very important. And hopefully people will see that as the repetition goes on, every brick that he's put in this wall begins to crumble.
Hello, this is Yanis from Greece. Congratulations to all for your film. My question is a little bit related with the previous one. If we look at the cinema's history, we will see that many classics, many films from the past and the present do have the profession of the assassin in the center of their stories. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, you as a filmmaker, how do you explain that? What is so attractive to that unusual profession?
It's a very compelling, very simple, straight line drama. You know, it's a very, the task at hand is relatable, it's dramatic, it's high stakes, you know, and in a lot of ways, it's extremely procedural, right? There are a lot of boxes that you need to tick before you exhale and pull. And so I think people have been, I mean, I didn't really think of the movie as an assassin movie. I think of it more as a revenge movie. I was more interested in the kind of the idea of somebody going, you only do this if you're getting paid, you only do it, and then here's a cabbie and a secretary and a carnet lawyer. And so the corpses that he leaves on the side of the road as he goes, none of those are the ones, they don't fit in any way, shape, or form into his mantra or into the schedule he has for himself. So I think we took something that people know, they understand what the goals of an assassin are. And again, they're high stakes. And again, it's something that's sort of fun to illustrate through coverage, through cuts. Does that answer the question? Okay.
I'm David Martos from Spain, from Quinótico. My question is for Mr. Fincher. I would like to know your opinion about the strike going on in Hollywood right now. And what do you think this strike says about the state of the industry we are working in?
I don't know what it says about the state of the industry. I'm very sad. You know, obviously, I sit in the middle of both parties. I can see I just got off. I mean, this movie was made during the pandemic, and you know, I never want to make a movie through a visor again or with goggles. Or, but having said that, we just got done with 3 years of having to sort of set our brushes down and walk away. The idea of that continuing on, especially now when is very sad to me. I think I can understand both sides, and I think all we can do is encourage them to talk.
Hello, this is for Mr. Fincher. So the opening sequence, right here, sorry. The opening sequence takes place in an abandoned WeWork. There's a sequence where your killer uses Amazon to get tools to copy the key fob, and the big bad is kind of a tacky billionaire who dispenses Bitcoin advice. But I'm curious what the killer says about late-stage capitalism.
I was interested in the idea, if we're to posit the idea that an assassin exists in a tangential world to our own or an adjacent world to our own, and this was really sort of Andrew Kevin Walker's, his gift. We talked about James Bond, and we talked about the idea, you know, we even see it in, you know, The Accountant. You see, there are assassin movies. Everybody seems to have a basement filled with, you know, Miele brushed stainless steel shelves that all pull out, and they have rocket launchers and an assortment of handguns. And we like that idea, but I think we wanted to talk about the disassociative nature of today and technology. And it never occurred to me that there would be a McDonald's in Paris that would be a window, and that you would, on your app, order your Big Mac and then show up. And the facelessness, the impersonality of that in conjunction with, you know, originally there was 2 or 3 pages of how Fassbender is going to relieve Arliss of his key to get into his apartment. And I remember calling Andy and saying, wouldn't he just have a fob copier? Couldn't he just and he said, oh, Dave, if that existed, people would never, your room key, no one would ever, and I said, just do a Google search, let me know. 11 seconds later, he sent me this Amazon page that had 15 fob copiers, all under $29, and they will send them to the Marriott that you're staying in, and it has, that idea, although irreverent, is also personally terrifying. So I love the melange of that.
But to this, the film has a humor, as a satirical dimension to it. If you're talking about really heinous violence, it's always good to have a little bit of humor in there.
Hi, Mr. Fincher. Great story, well detailed, very wonderful, and these little details with Google Maps and Amazon, that was amazing. So my question is, did you consider anyone else to play the main character, or the face of Fassbender, it was straight in your mind?
No, I think when the project came back around, at the point in time the project came back around in 2019, something like that. No, I sort of locked onto Michael, and like I say, I can't imagine having somebody who can do this, but can also do this. The kind of control that he has and the ability to, I think he was an excellent choice. And as we were shooting, one of the things that I became aware of is this strange hybrid. His face is this perfect amalgam of Charlton Heston and Laurence Olivier, and he can give you and that's the gamut. It could be a pulp star. It can be, very, very elegant. He can be elegant. I gotta say, Haywire was some of the influence for me as well, because I remember seeing that movie multiple times and thinking, wow, he's so watchable.
He was also a young Clint Eastwood when he was crossing the bridge. I would always look at that and go, Clint Eastwood.
Yeah. There's a question here, there's right there.
Sono Claudio Gargano per Notturno. Il personaggio di Fassbender, come lei diceva, ha tutto sotto controllo, vive secondo un determinato codice che gli permette anche di restare vivo, evidentemente, però già all'inizio del film fallisce, quasi come se lui inconsciamente voglia fallire. Volevo chiedere se è così e se il fatto di voler tenere questo mondo sotto controllo con delle regole, se può essere paragonato al lavoro del regista, che però deve essere pronto anche a qualunque cosa che sfugga al suo controllo e a recepirla, insomma, e ad adattarsi a qualunque imprevisto. Insomma, ecco, un'analogia tra il mondo controllato di Fassbender e il lavoro del regista.
I'll answer the second question first, because that's the one I remember. Yeah, I guess. I think, I think if there's any similarity between filmmaking and being a professional assassin, it's that stakes are high, involves technology, and you get your chance to record it and to have it or not. And so in that case, I guess in those respects, I guess they're similar. What was the first question?
The first question was if he, it seems like he controls everything, but he almost like he wants to lose that control in the opening sequence.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That may be one layer of the onion in terms of his. We access his thoughts. I don't know that we accessed his subconscious enough. I mean, I don't know that he accesses his subconscious enough to know whether that's the case. But certainly, you know, as he talks about, he's had a fairly good success rate. And, you know, again, I think it's all, plans are all well and good until you get punched in the face.
Just one question there.
Buon pomeriggio, Luca 800 Movie Player, e volevo porre una domanda che è, diciamo, specifica per quanto riguarda il momento del film che coinvolge, ma piuttosto ampia e mi sembra possa essere interessante perché potrebbe coinvolgere tutte le figure presenti al tavolo a livello tecnico. Io sono stato particolarmente colpito da una particolare sequenza, diciamo, con uno scontro casalingo notturno, senza andare troppo nello specifico per chi non dovesse aver visto il film, se ci sentono anche da fuori. E, mi sembra che nella sua mi sembra che nella sua apparente semplicità sia una sequenza evidentemente studiata con grande meticolosità e non ricordo un'altra volta in cui, vedendo un film in 2 dimensioni, mi è venuto da spostarmi per evitare il lancio di un oggetto mentre guardavo il film. Nella sua semplicità riesce a raggiungere un grado di immersività notevolissimo, quindi volevo sapere insomma come è stata concepita questo tipo di sequenza. Grazie.
Well, the immersive nature of the movie is all it's about. You know, it's really about, we take a camera, we put it in the orbital sockets of a character, and we give you his thoughts. And so everything becomes about how you illustrate the specific point of view. And as it relates to the fight scene, I mean, I had done, you know, Fight Club has some fights in it. I've done that stuff before, but I hadn't done anything that had that kind of breadth. And, you know, we talked about it. We wanted something that was absolutely exhausting for the audience, that we would look at it and go, oh my God, like, they're going to die. Both of them are going to die. So that was kind of the fun of it. If you're dodging the things that you feel are coming at you, then nice job, guys.
That's working.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, in the fight scene, which you were discussing, which I think we can, I don't think it's a secret, we can talk about it. I think David's approach in this film was very different from his approach on Fight Club. At least from, in many respects, music, sound, editing, length. When we did Fight Club, he was looking for a different sort of almost abstract texture sometimes. This time, however, he wanted an intimacy in the struggle between these two men, and so much so that he didn't even want to hear them making vocalizations. And when we were mixing, we would send to the mix to Trent and Atticus, the composers, and you know, we were always trying to make sure everybody feels good about where the film is headed. And Trent would say, where's all of the vocals, you know? And so, again, David had a different approach to what he wanted the audience to feel in that sequence. And what was great for us is that we could, you know, from Fight Club, which was a completely different kind of soundtrack for the lane that I was in, what I enjoy about it is how he described what he was trying to get was the world's quietest fight. So that's what it is.
Most deadly quietest.
Most deadly quietest fight.
But you know, the other thing about that is that we, you know, oftentimes in fight scenes, we shoot them to deliberately confuse the audience because it makes it more interesting. It makes it more impactful, maybe, is the thinking there. But I remember an early discussion we had was we want to make sure that the audience starts to map out the geography of this house while this is happening, so they almost have the same realization at the time of the killer that the gun is where it is. And so that he sort of circumnavigated the perimeter of the house through the process of this, and how do we make sure that we shoot it in such a way so that the space is described and we kind of begin to understand where he is. And that to me was a really interesting challenge in that particular thing, because it's more than just hand-holding the camera and making sure it's on the right side of the punch so it lands properly. It's, it was a much more sophisticated way to think about space and think about people moving through the space.
And it's interesting also how the different characters emerge from the fight. It's like, it's like a conversation of sort.
Explodes.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, no. It explodes in pace once the other person comes into it. The fight is explosive. But if you, the joy for me with it is if you widen out and think of the whole thing as a piece of music, the lead up when the killer is in control and getting closer and closer, that's stretched. And everything is precise when he's in control. And the moment that control is left, now it's clipped and it's faster, and his voiceover gets interrupted. That mantra had further to go, but the plan doesn't belong to him anymore. And then you think it's over and pause, cue dog.
It was also important to me, I like the idea of a dark house, two people fighting. These are two assassins. They both have long criminal histories. Neither of them want to be, talking to Florida PD about a domestic disturbance in this house on stilts. So they are one of them is going to finish the job. And I like the idea that they were trying to do it as quietly as possible, even though it meant, beating somebody to death with a bong.
I think we have time for one more. She's been waiting for a long time. Yeah.
It's not going to blow your mind, but hello, Mr. Fincher. Thank you for the film. First of all, I was wondering if you could talk about Tilda Swinton's character and what it was like to work with her. And the second one, I think it's been touched upon a little bit just now. It was so interesting to me because you spoke about how unlikable your protagonist is, which is true, and how sociopathic.
I liked him.
No, Mr. But because you mentioned the dog, it was really interesting to me that, what happened with the dog, and it kind of made me dislike him a little bit less, because...
What was the first question?
Tilda Swinton. Working with Tilda Swinton and her character.
Look, everybody wants to work with Tilda Swinton. Tilda Swinton is a unicorn, and I'd worked with her on Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which was mostly me just sort of like staring at the monitor in a fawning way and going, oh, great, she's done? Great. And we had this idea that there was going to be the samurai was going to meet an elder samurai on the road, and they were going to have a discussion about what the ghost of Christmas is yet to come is going to leave in Fassbender's mind. And it is a manipulation. These are 5, 6 Bernie Birnbaum scenes, as I like to call them. It's one of my favorite Coen Brothers movie, Miller's Crossing. And you're taking a guy out into the woods, and one of you is not coming back. And it's six scenes like that. And so the question was to make them all very different. Someone's going to beg for their life. Someone's going to say, you don't have the courage. Somebody else is going to go into the manipulation as to, this hurts you more than it hurts me. Think about it. All those things. And I thought, if you have an 8-page scene of an elder assassin statesman, Tilda Swinton, knock me over with a feather and throw a sheet over me. That's easy.
But she does so much too before her dialogue kicks in, the realization that this is happening and has happened when he sits down, the amount of things that happen with her eyes before her speech
and her
begins.
Lip. I love that. She's like,
damn. This just happened.
Yeah.
And we were in hysterics when we were studying how well she delivers it just with eyeballs.
Yeah.
Okay, the very last one.
Hello, I'm Bao from China. Thank you for the great film. And my question is, you have a interviewed many serial killers in the Mindhunters, and I'm very sad that there's no third season. But I'm very, very happy that the new film is about killer actually is also a kind of serial killer. And you also, many of your crew from this film are also from the Mindhunters. So I wonder if the work of Mindhunters helped to build the character, because in the graphic novels, actually there's not a lot of background story of the character. Yeah.
Mindhunter, obviously doing all the legwork and research that one has to do to tell the story of that many varied, despicable characters. You learn a lot about sociopathy. And so that was a really important part in being able to kind of dramatize, characterize him. There are just shortcomings that the character needs to have, and they're going to be evident in different ways depending on the external forces. So, yeah, it was a great thing to be able to say, this is not BTK. You know, like we've had this discussion. We sort of know what we're talking about. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think she's also asked if there's going to be another season.
No. No, there's not.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have to finish here. Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.